Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Look at these two. Oh, my colleagues know I'm a stickler for time, and so I'm going to go ahead and start us off today. On behalf of the Kentucky ACE Women's Network, I'd like to welcome you to what is our final leadership development event for our spring 2021 program. My name is Katie Cardarelli, and I am the current state chair of the Kentucky ACE Women's Network, and I'm Senior Assistant Provost for Faculty Affairs at the University of Kentucky. For those of you that may not be familiar with the Kentucky ACE Women's Network, we are a state affiliate of the American Council on Education's National Women's Network. Our mission is to advance women, staff, and faculty into leadership roles in higher education. And the Kentucky ACE Women's Network is comprised of colleges and universities across the Commonwealth. In lieu of our annual conference about a year ago, the COVID-19 pandemic forced us to change the way that we deliver professional development content to our institutional members. And we are really proud of the 6 events that we have organized and implemented in the current academic year. I'm also very proud that we have grown the institutional membership of the network in the last year, which really brings to bear the collective strengths of our institutions to advance women. I want to acknowledge the leadership of our board, many of whom are in attendance today, including colleagues from Eastern Kentucky University, the University of Louisville, Murray State University, Berea College, and the University of Kentucky. I also want to acknowledge the assistance today of my colleagues Anna Chalfant and Jennifer Haynes, who are in the Provost's office here at UK. So the board knows that today's program is one that I am extremely excited about. We feature the leadership of one of the Commonwealth's leading voices in higher education, Dr. Neely Bendapudi, president of the University of Louisville. But before I introduce her, there is someone else here at the University of Kentucky who would like to say a few words. I believe these two are friends. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to the 12th president of the University of Kentucky, Dr. Eli Capilouto.
Thank you, Katie. And I'm fulfilling one of my dreams as president of the University of Kentucky. I am the warm-up act for Neely Bendapudi. How about that? I'm going to put that on my resume, Neely. But it's a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon. I know you're in for a treat. I'm going to stay and listen to Neely if you don't mind. But Neely knows this, that as the president of the University of Kentucky, you do not have within your wardrobe many ties that have red on them, you know? And when Neely and I appear together, sometimes in front of CPE when we're advocates for research universities, I wear my tie with red. I'm wearing it today out of deep respect for Neely and appreciation for her friendship. Just like all of you on this Zoom call today, it's been a tough year for university presidents as well. And when Neely and I speak every once in a while, I think we provide each other good solace. And what I appreciate about Neely is being so level-headed and even-keeled. And then when it's appropriate, Neely and I can smile and laugh together, which helps get through the pandemic that we're all experiencing. So during this past year, I think all of us have worn out the words unparalleled, unprecedented. I don't want to use them anymore. And we certainly talked about normal and returning to normal. And I'm hopefully thinking that we can do that certainly as we re-inhabit our campuses in the fall. And it's another opportunity for us to talk about how can we improve upon what was normal and upon what this new normal is, and how we can do more for the people we serve and for all of those who make us who we are. And universities across this Commonwealth, I believe, are a backbone of stability and endurance and are on the forefront of progress and change. So I commend all of you for participating today as leaders and as future leaders. And at the University of Kentucky, we look at our spaces on campus and say, you know, they must be designed to build community and engagement. But after this year, we're reminded again, especially when we had to physically distance, that it's not just the buildings, it's what goes on within them. And that's about our people and the impact we can have on one another and on the Commonwealth. So our people, our institutions of higher education, to me, are indispensable in terms of the future of the University of Kentucky. And women are imperative in our efforts to make for a brighter future in Kentucky. So our campus has an impressive history when it comes to women. And this month in particular, I went back and looked at a book I was provided. I highly recommend it to you if you're curious about women and the University of Kentucky. It was written by our own Terry Birdwhistle and Deirdre Skaggs, and it's called Our Rightful Place, A History of Women at the University of Kentucky, 1880 to 1945. So there's one, there are many vignettes in here. I'm going to share with just one of them with you. But Dr. Patterson, who was a long-serving first president of the University of Kentucky, in 1880 makes the decision to enroll women. And he admitted 3 women, and one of them was Sophonisba Breckinridge. And unfortunately, she transferred after a couple of years to Wellesley. And when she was asked about it a few years later, I like this quote because I think it's fitting for the day. She said, "The great charm of Wellesley College, what it held for me, was that it was made or established for me or the likes of me." And, you know, those words resonate with me. So we have this marvelous history we learn from. What we considered normal back then certainly isn't today. Women had to push open those doors. There's still heavy doors open, still heavy doors to open. And women are essential in helping us understand how to unlock those doors and define a new normal. And being part of a university community for a woman is certainly more than just a paycheck. It's about opportunities that I appreciate all of you are taking today to grow personally and professionally. And we've got to set up that kind of environment to explore our talents and further advance our interest to lead towards more meaningful change. So it is about creating that new, a better normal, and in the words of Ms. Breckinridge, creating a place for the likes of all of us and how different we are than 1880. But when I look at all our university campuses and I think of some of the turmoil we're going through in our Commonwealth and country over inequality and social justice, to me, our universities represent a common beacon. Because we bring together people from all over Kentucky and all over the world who, you know, may have grown up in communities where everyone looked similarly. And when you hit one of our campuses throughout Kentucky, you have that opportunity to meet people who had a different life experience from all corners of Kentucky and all corners of the globe. And that's what fills me with such great hope. So we need to double down on empowering women at every level. I know on our campus, the richness of the contributions of our female faculty and staff have helped us be a better university. So I know through these efforts across our campuses, within our campuses, we're going to create more and better pipelines for women to advance as scholars, as professors, as administrators. And your being part of this community is going to be essential in those efforts. So I look forward to listening and learning today. And again, it was an honor to be the warm-up act for Neely Bendapudi. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Capilouto, for your gracious comments. And thank you for your tireless support of women in higher education. I'm now pleased to introduce to you our featured speaker, Dr. Neeli Bendapudi. Neeli Bendapudi is the 18th president of the University of Louisville. She received her PhD in marketing from the University of Kansas and has taught at The Ohio State University and Texas A&M University. She most recently served as provost and executive vice chancellor at the University of Kansas, where she had previously been dean and professor of business at the KU School of Business. Professor Bendapudi specializes in the study of consumer behavior in service contexts, which strikes me as really important in these enrollment management challenging times these days. Her research deals with customers' willingness and ability to maintain long-term relationships with firms and with the brands and employees that represent them. Her research has been published in top-tier journals, including the Journal of Academic Medicine, Harvard Business Review, and the Journal of Marketing. She has experience on a number of public and private boards and served as EVP and Chief Customer Officer of Huntington National Bank. Her vision is to ensure that the University of Louisville is a great place to learn, to work, and to invest because it celebrates diversity, fosters equity, and strives to achieve inclusion. Dr. Bendapudi, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I have a few questions to get us started, and then we're also going to take questions from our audience, which I know you're excited about. So at this time, I'm going to ask our audience to enter your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, not the chat box. And we will do our best to get to as many of those as we can during our time together. But let me just start by again welcoming you, Neeli, and please tell us about your leadership journey to date.
Oh my goodness. Katie, thank you so much. But first, I have to thank Eli. I want you all to know that when I was at the University of Kansas, our colors were blue and red, and that's my alma mater. So when I came here, honest to goodness, I gave away all the blue except for this one because I hadn't worn it yet. So I'm just hoping that this is a challenge to Eli. He is right, that when we appear together, we use each other's colors. So maybe something I have not been able to convince my husband, maybe Eli Capilouto will show up in a red suit. Don't you think that's a good idea at our next meeting? But seriously, Eli, thank you. I consider him genuinely a friend and a mentor. He is exaggerating how we provide each other with advice. I call on him constantly, and the extent of our personal friendship is, he doesn't know this, but I think I'm pretty sure he's my first presidential colleague that I sent a picture to when my grandson was born and said, Eli, I want to share. It's the truth. So he's just a wonderful colleague, and I'm so grateful for that mentorship. So today, everybody enjoy sibling rivalry between all of our schools, but we are all here for higher education. So Katie, I don't know how to answer that question that you posed. It's a big one. I will tell you that I did not have aspirations for academic leadership. I did not think that was a path. Always wanted to be an academic though. I found it really fascinating, wanted to do that. So I became a professor. And early on as an assistant professor in business, I was very fortunate to be tapped for a couple of opportunities. The thing that surprised me was I've always been a problem solver. I want to be able to do something when I see an issue. And so it's not original, but I joke about how people can be either thermometers or thermostats, right? The thermometers are the people who will tell you what temperature it is. It's too hot, it's too cold. A thermostat will actually do something to make it what you want it to be. So I wanted to be the kind of person that you do need thermometers. You do need people who will say, this is wrong, but you also need some thermostats who will say, I'll address the issue. And I've always wanted to be one of the people that makes that change. So I got tapped for a leadership opportunity as a young assistant professor at Ohio State University. The Ohio State University, mind you, which is my academic home, and in terms of the assistant, associate, full professor trajectory. And so that gave me a taste for how it is to lead with influence and not authority. Because in setting up a center where CEOs of major companies were all brought together, and the entirety of Ohio State University, so it's the deans from different groups actually helping shaping something. It turned into a nationwide, that's the insurance company's Center for Customer Analytics and Insights, which started off as the Initiative for Managing Services. It got me excited. So I still have great gratitude to Joe Aludo, who was the dean of the business school at the time, that trusted me with that endeavor. After that, again, I started working with businesses. I loved that, all for the benefit of Ohio State University. I was tapped. One of the things I wanted to do was be executive vice president of Huntington Bank. That's unusual, I know, but when I was at Ohio State, pretty much 6 months of every year, I would work with a different company on some massive problem they were having. And typically it's customer experience that really is at my heart. And the people serving them. How do you serve without feeling servile? How do we take care of our people so that they take care of our customers? What else should I tell you? One more very eventful thing for me in my leadership journey is that when I was at Huntington Bank, there was an opportunity for me to be part of the International Women's Forum. Look up IWF if you have a chance. It's a wonderful group. And I was selected to be a fellow. So I got a chance to be one of 27 women from 18 different countries. And the others were exceptional people that went on to run for prime minister of a country, and just amazing women that were role models to me. And I love being the president. Then I became dean at the University of Kansas, went back to my alma mater because my faculty asked me to come back, and people I respected. And in academe, we talk about people in administration as having gone over to the dark side, or you're supposed to say you don't like it. But actually I found at every level of leadership that I was able to actually make a difference in more people's lives. So candidly, the climb from dean to provost to president, if I were a more talented researcher, if I were a better teacher, if I did other things, I might not have followed this path. But I definitely love this particular role that I have.
So you talk about the servant characteristic of leadership. And I noticed that, in your leadership, particularly in the time that you have been president there, that you have made yourself very accessible to your constituents, even offering your cell phone number to students. And I've heard this from colleagues at University of Louisville. Can you talk about why you think that's important, making yourself accessible? And then I also want to know how many students have called or texted you.
So I started that when I became dean. I used to do that routinely to every class I taught at Ohio State. So I taught the core MBA, the undergrad, I would just give them my number, that if they were ever in a bind that they could reach out. It was email first, and a home phone number, and then cell phone. As dean, and then I did that in Kansas as well. But here I thought I was coming into the University of Louisville at a very interesting time, as you know. Lots of challenges, and it's not that we have overcome them at all. It's a journey, right? You're going to be on it every day. And I wanted to make sure that none of us forgets why we are here. May sound trite, but I completely believe in the mission of higher education to transform lives for the better. I'm a living testament to that fact. And so I knew that our profile is rather unique. We are a Research One university, but we have 40% of our students are Pell eligible. It's a very large percentage. And also we have a number of first generation students. And as you know, we have a very high proportion of students of color. We have a very high percentage of students who identify as LGBTQ and come here. So there were a lot of individuals for one reason or another. And if you think about it, like they might be here from small towns where they've not really interacted with so much difference. And I wanted to be sure that they knew that they would not fall through the cracks. So that is true. Every freshman class, I give my number to the entire class and encourage them to share it with everybody. And it's the exact same number that Eli Capilouto has as well. So I don't keep two phones. This is the phone number. And I did that because if they are in a real crisis and don't know where to go, asking them to reach out to me does two things. And this is the AC Women's Network, and you're all going to be leaders, and you already are leaders. So I will tell you, it has two purposes. One is if a student has to reach out to me, it means all along the way someone failed them, because the pact with the students is not to use it unless it's an emergency, because they should email me or contact someone. So it's a good way to motivate everybody who reports up to me. You don't want to be the reason that someone is reaching out to the president of the university. The other thing is, I did want them to know that they're the reason we exist. You know what I mean? And so no one has abused it ever. And that I think is incredible. And sometimes when a student reaches out, that may not be a crisis as you and I would define it. But the funniest one, I do get texts. Yes, they do text. Sometimes they call, but it's not like a funny ha-ha, but very touching to me. I'll tell you something from another university so that I don't disclose anyone here. When I was at Kansas as the dean of the business school, I got a text and then from a young lady. They don't have to identify themselves. I don't have their numbers. So if they want me to follow up, I can. Who texted to say, Dean, I have an interview tomorrow. And my roommate is telling me that I can't remember. I can't wear black shoes with a blue suit or a blue shoe with black suit or something. It was a first interview, don't know what to do. So I still remember, I thought about it for a moment and I texted her and said, your roommate has no idea what they're talking about. That is not true at all. Right now, the in thing is actually to don't abide by those rules. You know, in New York, people don't care. You do great. And then if you want to talk, because she said she only had one suit and this was her first time interviewing, I said, you'll do great. And then if you want to talk further, reach out. And to my great delight, she did reach out. And we talked. She did a great job on the interview. And then I confessed to her that I'm the last person to ask about, you know, what is the greatest thing to do. But it made me aware of the pressures, right? You know, imagine a young woman. She was first generation interviewing for a job. She didn't have the money to go out and buy something else. And so those things happen. And she's gone on to a great career, I'm pleased to tell you.
Thank you for sharing that story. So here's a question from one of our audience participants. It sounds like you've maintained strong, long-lasting professional connections over your career. How do you maintain these relationships over many years and long distances?
I wish I were even better at it. I have been very, very fortunate to have those relationships, but I would say you don't get to maintain the same level of relationship with everybody. The advice I used to give my students is, as you go through your coursework, every semester, maybe there's one professor you can get to really know. And so I enjoy people. The part of it is that I love it. You know, I gain something from knowing them. And I've been fortunate to make some really good friends where they know that in this crazy schedule that we are not going to be able to talk every day. But if they call, I'm always there for them and vice versa. There has to be some intentionality. You do need to say, who are people that mean something to you, that inspire you, or they're there for you, or whatever the case may be. So I try. I'm not as good at it as you may think.
So you talked earlier about the multiple transitions in leadership that you've had over your time in your career. Can you talk about the role of mentors and or sponsors, and specifically as a woman advancing in leadership roles?
I'm glad to. And then I want to maybe call out something that all of you know, being in a university setting, but that's not often known widely is that universities, for all our talk, right? If people on the outside, what do they say about us? They say we have snowflakes and we're safe spaces and that we are these bastions of egalitarianism. And the hard truth is that we absolutely are not. We do much worse, candidly, than many, many, many businesses our size. There's not even a question about that. How do I say that? It's because if you look, and for me, that's certainly been my experience, is that when you look at, let's do both the faculty and staff track. If you look at faculty, what happens is we have many women who rise to the associate professor track. But if you look at full professors, if you look at chaired professors, those numbers are embarrassing. That was certainly the case. I'm not pointing out any one university because it's true. I've been at Texas A&M for about 2 years, almost. Then Ohio State recruited us away, Kansas, and now at University of Louisville. So we've got to do something. And I was, without question, always not just one of the few women of color. It's a challenge. It's something we have to look at. And when you look at staff, it's the same way. We have a lot of women who enter, but then we have some maybe at a supervisory level, but how many women do we really have at the top? And how do we break that? And why should we break it? Maybe that's a good question. And I will get to mentors and sponsors in a minute. Maybe we should all take a moment and say, why? Why do we need more women represented or in some sort of proportion to how many are at the entry level? I'd strongly recommend resources like Catalyst. Maybe you all have looked at it, catalyst.org, for all the data you could need. McKinsey has a great article out. The American Association of University Women just have a report out that came out in the last couple of months. They all show that if you are interested in your bottom line, the more diverse your leadership is, the more women in particular, but not in particular. I'm focusing on women now, but it's true for all diversity. More women leaders at the top, whether it's on the C-suite or even the board, companies are more profitable, organizations are more effective, so they have actual numbers for private and public and university systems. You find that women in leadership often leads to more discussion specifically about gender and racial equity and even more attention to pay inequity. So I think, first of all, let's establish the case that it's not just a nice thing to do because you're a kind person. If you really want to do well by your organization, you do better by having diversity at the top. Mentors and sponsors. Katie, looks like you all have pursued this. I try to distinguish between the two. And your definition and mine, I don't know if they're identical, but I'm delighted you pointed out both. So I ask everyone to do a 2x2. Pretend you have a piece of paper, draw a square, cut it lengthwise and x-axis and y-axis, if you will. On one axis, if you say personal help, low and high, right? Think of x-axis is how much personal help someone can give you, low or high. And then on the y-axis, you may write professional help, low or high. So you have 4 cells now, right? So who would be in the low, personal and professional? That would be a potential ally. You don't know them, they're just a colleague. There's not much personal help or mutually or professional help. And then you have people who are very high on personal help to you, but maybe not so much professionally. Who could that be? In that category, I would put family and friends. So your mom, your brother, your spouse, they give you a lot of personal support, but they may not be the ones to give you professional advice. I'm not saying they don't support your career. I'm saying they may not be the ones you go to say, how do I navigate this issue? In fact, I would advise against it because their bias would be to support you. And so it's good to have that support system, but I wouldn't advise relying on them only for how do I talk to my boss? What do I do? And then there are people who give you outstanding support in your professional, but maybe it's not so much a personal relationship. Those are the people I call sponsors. So they care. They're interested, invested at the top in development, and they might say, I'll talk to you about your professional, but we don't know each other well enough for a mentor. I use the word mentor very selectively for people with whom I can discuss the fullness of my challenges as personally and professionally. Does that make sense? So that's how the mentors and sponsors that I think of. Very, very crucial. So my advice to women, in particular, true for everybody, is you may not see a mentor readily within your own environment, right? But be pleasantly persistent. If you see someone you look up to, it could be a peer mentor. It doesn't always have to be somebody higher up than you, that it's important. I've had wonderful mentors, and many of them have been men. The world I worked in, whether it's in business or in banking or elsewhere, even on the faculty, as I told you, Texas A&M, I was the only woman on the marketing faculty at the time. And so it doesn't matter where you are, is sometimes men or women can be active supporters and mentors. And they need to be.
Thank you. You know, as you were talking earlier, it strikes me, you know, when I'm thinking about when you were talking about the importance of women, particularly in leadership roles, it strikes me that, you know, the COVID epidemic has disrupted everyone's productivity, scholarship, teaching quality, everything. But certainly there has been a disproportionate burden that has fallen on the shoulders of women who are often the caregivers, primary caregivers in families. And, you know, I've read the McKinsey report and others that have speculated about the impact of losing women in leadership in the corporate world. But I just wondered if you could speak for a few moments about your thoughts about the potential for losing women in leadership roles in academia because of the COVID pandemic.
100% right. It's women, and as you recall, disproportionately women of color and specifically Black women have been very, very, very hard hit. Black and Latino populations have been hit, but certainly we see, you've seen the same numbers of how many are rethinking what they would do. So within the university system, there's a lot we can do. And we are doing things that I'm sure other universities are considering as well, which is if someone's on a tenure track, how do you give them the ability to maybe pause their clock for a year, because this has been an exceptionally, it's a pandemic that happens hopefully once every 100 years. Let's hope so. Let's hope that's true. So that it's exceptional times and that we need to be mindful of it. And what support are we providing? For women, I'll call them the only syndrome. So there are several words I'm going to use if we have time to talk about. So remind me, I want to talk about the broken rung. I want to talk about the glass cliff. I know people know the glass ceiling. So the broken rung, and we'll talk about the glass cliff, and then the pressure of being the only. Maybe those are three things, if we have time, we could talk about. So I think when people are dropping out of leadership roles, as you said, at a minimum, acknowledging this, saying you're not alone, you're not the only. What are we? I applaud you, Katie, for creating for being the chair at this time, increasing membership, holding programs like this, because knowing you're not the only one is one of the biggest things you could do. Dr. Capilouto started with that quote, the likes of me. You know, that's important. You're not alone. There are others like you who are going through that. That matters. I hope that supervisors are given good training. That's another thing we need to do. There may be really good intentions at the top, but then what's happening all the way down? And it's not that it's that people don't have good intentions. We may not always give them the tools to be successful. So how do we make sure we're creating, I think it's a crisis, Katie, I do, that if we don't do something, we lose a generation of women, right? That step away, don't take that promotion, don't push.
Okay, do you want to speak about the glass cliff?
Certainly.
Yeah, that's not a term I'm familiar with.
It's a really fascinating thing that I'd encourage you all to look at. The research has actually been around a while, but it's gained traction in the last couple of years. It's over 15 years old. And one of my good mentors actually studied it very early on. The idea of the glass cliff is, when do institutions, whether they are universities or a nonprofit or any type of entity, every industry has a normative leader. So if in your university, if you would go walk around, we have a panel of all the presidents that we have had, right? Or vice presidents or provosts. There's a norm for who you think would be the university president or a corporate president or a bank CEO or whatever you have. The research shows, glass ceiling, everybody knows. The glass cliff is the idea that boards or decision makers will choose a non-normative leader. So the woman, the first person of color, whatever. If it's an industry where it's all women who've been leaders before, if you pick the first male, this would apply. There's not many of those, but you get my point. That you pick non-normative leaders when things are really, really bad at an institution. There's some crisis. When things are going really well and they have to find a replacement, they're more likely to pick someone who looks like the norm. So why should you care about this when you're thinking about women in leadership? If more women get picked, and there's a whole host of literature around this. If more women are picked to do turnarounds in really tough situations, what will happen? They may not all be as successful because or people of color. If you're Latina or Latino and the choices you picked is to do only turnarounds, then what will happen is you're putting extra pressure on them to succeed. And when you look at the track record, the fear always is, and I am very aware of that. If people say, oh, Neely did a good job or a poor job, that's one thing. But if they then say, we picked a woman for that job, she couldn't do it. Or we picked a person of color and they didn't do it. So my advice to all of you listening to this is, when you tap women for leadership roles, think about, are we picking women or people of color, in this case, we're focusing on women, disproportionately to do tougher jobs? And honest to goodness, I didn't stage it this way. This morning, I had a conversation with a woman who is a leader in a corporate setting. And she was talking about how, when she looked at there were 400 VPs in that corporation, it's a multinational, that when they picked women or people of color, it tended to be in tough situations. Does that make sense? So are we putting them on glass cliffs versus that's the idea.
Thank you for explaining that. So one of the questions we had from our audience was about the imposter syndrome.
Oh, yes.
Have you experienced the imposter syndrome?
Yes, absolutely. And know that it's not a gender specific thing. Men and women do feel that imposter syndrome, but certainly I think for women, it's harder. There's just no question. I did a small experiment when I was at Huntington Bank and didn't really publish it. I was just curious, and someday we should study this more. Meaning that when we had promotion, we had some new computers, programming. And then we'd say, if you master this, we'd like to promote you. Men and women, we found that the women would say, I'm not ready for it because I have not mastered 100% of this. And so the only way, and the men would have, and this is a gross generalization, this is not true for every single person. They might get 70% of it and they're like, yep, I got it, I can do this. So the imposter syndrome, it's gotten better now, but I would have it all the time. And I'll give you the cure, where it would be, I would be tapped for things and I would come home and say, oh my gosh, I don't know all the things about this. They've given me this job. What if they find out that I don't know 100% of this? And what really helped me was my husband said to me, all right, so you're not sure you can do this. So you think you're smarter and you can fool everybody else, that somehow you're smarter than everybody else, and you are convinced you can con them all. It's that deep doubt of, can I really do this? So knowing it's out there, it's real, it can be debilitating. Then the other thing that helped me at the same time I had this conversation was talking to a male professor, many, many years my senior, my mentor. And I said, I feel really bad about this, but I have this sentiment, that I'm not really good enough, or am I ready for it? And he laughed so hard and told me it's called the Imposter Syndrome, that he had it. I was like, no, you're one of the most eminent professors out there in the world. So that actually helped. So those two things, it's not a cure, but I would remind myself, okay, this professor that I look up to has this and said, and my husband said this, who am I to say I'm smarter and I'm pulling the wool over everybody's eyes, but I still, in the ACC, I'm being personal here, and I hope you will respect that I'm trying to help here. I remember the first ACC president's meeting. So as the one woman in a group of 15 and being a new president, being the one person of color in that room, it was interesting. And I thought, oh my gosh, they're all going to know that XYZ that I don't know. So you know what I mean? So you still struggle with it, but don't let it hold you back, because we bring a perspective, I'll say that. And to me, diversity of thought is incredibly important at the table, because I do not assume malintent. It's just that each of us brings our life's experiences. The truth is that I know that I saw Manjari on here and others. So in my language in India, I will tell you that when I was growing up, and this is absolute truth, they will say, when you have a child, if it's a girl, people will say, they used to, it's changed a lot. Oh, I'm so sorry. Or they'll say, well, I tell you what, don't tell lies or you'll have daughters. That's what is said when you tell a lie. So there's something that happens about knowing what it's like to say, you've got to prove yourself, and that someday we should stop. I hope someday it doesn't work that way, but I don't know if it sounded rambling. There's so little time and I so want to make sure it's of use. So my apologies if that wasn't very coherent. But
no, that was wonderful. Thank you. And I appreciate you sharing that, the affirmation from your spouse, is part of what sort of, helps you to break through that. In my experience, similar affirmation from, your peer colleagues, especially those with whom you've had a long-term relationship, can similarly be helpful to sort of break through that. So no, I think our audience appreciates the stories.
if you don't mind, I want to call out that. That's extraordinarily important. It started at the home because at that time I didn't feel I could open up and talk about this. Was when I was a rookie assistant professor, I had just taken the job. I will tell you that women, what we say to each other, how we hold up each other is incredibly important. And so I did find they weren't women in my department, but I had a small group, and she is extraordinary. A woman who brought together other junior faculty, women, and she just did it. And now what you're doing, Katie, in providing opportunities for faculty and staff, for women to gather, because I bet you anything that if in this group, we don't have time to poll, but I want to ask everybody, has this happened to you? You've come up with an idea in a team and you finally speak up. No, and people acknowledge it, but a few minutes later, a man says it. And then everybody says, Tom, that is such a brilliant idea. So what do? I had a group of women, my women friends, we all sat around and said, we made a pact. I made a pact with the fellow dean that if that ever happened, because you look so petty to say, that's not Tom's idea, it's my idea. It's not that. To say, we would speak up and say, oh, Tom, thank you, that was brilliant. I like how you built on Amy's idea. Amy, is that what you meant to say? Like you be the one that speaks up for that. Or learn how to avoid the mansplaining. I don't have enough time, but how much time do you take up? How long do you speak? How loud do you speak in a meeting? Are we noting that? All right, I'm done. Keep going.
So just so you know, there's a lot of affirmation in the chat now for the comments you just made by several of our participants. And you've already answered this next question that we had. I will just read it to you so you can, I want to make sure I get all these questions read. One was, how do you handle situations where men are speaking first and dominating conversations, but your leadership style is not about interrupting others or dominating conversations?
Luckily, I'm an extrovert. Luckily, meaning I'm putting it in big quotes. And so maybe we can talk about this. This is a very, very real thing I've seen with women, and especially from different cultures. It's rude to interrupt. It's also like a sign of, I've seen it in so many meetings now. There'll be a topic to speak. I still fight it. I still struggle. So there'll be 10 of us and they'll say, what do you think? And if you really timed how much time the women take versus the men take, the difference is dramatic. And so something that I did before that you could try is ask everyone to think for a moment about it. And I'll tell you the extrovert introvert thing. If you said, what do you think about it? Right? In this case, I'm an extrovert. I'm happy to start talking. I'll raise my hand, confident that by the time you call on me, I'll have an answer, right? Whereas an introvert will want to think things through before they say it. And so my point is, when we talk about fostering equity, that's a perfect example of creating equity. You could say, oh no, I asked everyone if they wanted to speak up. The point I was trying to make is men will take longer, take up more time to speak. And I don't know where that confidence comes from or how women do, how we can do that. But to level set, it might be, I want to hear from everybody. Everybody take a moment and think about this, and we'll come back to it. It really helps. In class, I noticed that just giving that few minutes to say, think about it, might make you more confident. Or keep saying, who else have we not heard from? Maybe we just make a rule that the same person cannot be the one who starts a meeting. I take best practices and ideas from everywhere. We do think we should pass the roles. Like if you find that you're the woman that has to speak up for the negatives of that, that's an uncomfortable situation, right? So we don't have time. I'm not going to go down that path. Next question.
Those are terrific specific tactics, for our audience to try. So we have an audience question. What can we do to incorporate gender studies and awareness about gender inequity and inequality into general education requirements so that our students go out, into the world, and really have fundamental understandings of these concepts and how how they're manifested?
I think that we have, well, obviously curriculum is absolutely faculty academic freedom issue. No president can, or in my mind should dictate this should be taught, this should be taught. I think there's awareness, but we need to be more specific about this, like the topics we just talked about. Would we be comfortable in our departmental faculty meetings to say, hey, we were in this meeting and we all talked about this. Let's be more mindful of whether we are creating opportunities to hear from the women and for the men. And in terms of gender studies and how do we make it more people interested in this, I don't know, Katie. I would be curious from everybody's point of view. I definitely think these are vital conversations. And, you know, I don't know. I find that, again, it's a great example of where with resource groups and so on, I find more being done in business than in academia.
Yeah. Okay, so this is kind of a fun question for you. Would Neely ever teach a course at the University of Louisville that covers these topics of the broken rung and the glass cliff?
So the broken rung is the whole idea that we have so many people that come in and then we never give them the first essential thing to leadership. So let's say we want more women presidents. Well, to be president, you might need to have a stint at a lower level. Maybe they need to have been a dean somewhere. Maybe to be dean, you have to be a department chair. To be a department chair, maybe you need some leadership experience. So we don't create that first run. I would love to teach. I did, and Eli is the best. Eli Capilouto, I am a raving fan, I will tell you, because I ask him how he's doing, and every day he says the answer is never better. And he told me that in year 8, it'll be so much fun to be a university president. So at least by year 8, I will teach a course. But these conversations I genuinely enjoy, but it has to be not the big thoughts and ideas. It needs to be specifics. That's what a small group of women and I would do. Like I'll give you an example. Where women need help is when I was at another university, I'd win these teaching awards. I worked so hard at it and I would feel very delighted. And one of my male colleagues would say, I was a junior professor, would say, oh, that's because you smile, Neely. Everybody likes you. It's because you smile. I was crushed by that. Didn't know how to respond, you know? What do I say? But then I talked to a woman, my mentor, who was not associated with the university because there were so few full professors at the time in our College of Business. And she said to me, just don't bat an eye next time because it'll happen again. Just say, you are absolutely right. You should try it too. That's right. Winning a university teaching award is just all about smiling. You do it too. So we need those specifics of what are we facing and how will we address that?
You know, listening to you speak about the broken rung, you know, I know certainly at the University of Kentucky, it's something that we, you know, are definitely monitoring with analytics. Women who are in, for example, you know, director of graduate studies, director of undergraduate studies, chair, associate dean, dean, and so on. And, you know, we continue to strive to, you know, bring women into those roles. So I appreciate you talking about that. We don't have a lot.
Nana, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So there's so many great resources to see what other people are doing. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We'll certainly look to what's happening at UK and learn because we're all sibling rivalry, right? Within the state but we're all committed to uplifting the citizens of the Commonwealth and keeping true to the mission. I see other institutions conscious about that. So don't just put women in service roles. Don't just put women to plan the events and be careful of the labels we use in describing one another.
Absolutely. We do have several other questions, but I wanted to give Dr. Capilouto the opportunity to ask a question.
Oh my gosh, no.
He felt so inclined.
Excuse me, I want to thank Neely. She's brought back some very good memories for me. It must be through the water they drink at the University of Louisville. I served as a provost for 9 years. The president I served was the former provost of the University of Louisville, Carol Garrison. And, you know, in so many ways, I try to model what she taught me. And Neely, your admonitions and insights into people speaking loudest and first and longest. This is the way she taught me to conduct search committees, for instance, and I do them to this day. She told me that when I would go debrief a search committee, that I would go in different directions going around the room, and I would start at different places, but I would have everyone make one comment. That's all you can make. And we would continue going around that room till, you know, you exhausted them. But I felt like, wow, that was so masterful. It so leveled the playing field and the richness of what you learn. So I want to thank you, not to ask another question, but for being so insightful and helpful. I know to everybody on this call, but especially to me. I did an interview earlier with a group of journalists to talk about diversity issues, mainly around color. And, you know, one of the answers I provided was, you know, it's not about the people of color, it's the people of whiteness and defining who we are. And it goes for gender too. So today you've helped me, I hope, be a better administrator and colleague. So I thank you.
Well, you know what? I have to pay back some point. You teach me all the time. So if there's something that helped you, we have a series. I just want to make one more point about here at the University of Louisville, we're calling it Femme Forward. So it's women, trans women, people who identify. So it's important that we do that, because I just noticed a note from Kate Pardon, which I love, which is think, pair, and share. Like it helps introverts and extroverts. I could not agree more. That's why I started off with, if you want to be more effective, if you want to be more profitable, if you want to be more competitive, have diversity at the top and throughout.
Well, I want to thank you, President Bendapudi, for being with us today. Thank you, President Capilouto, for joining us today. I have seen a number of very positive comments in the chat. I think our audience enjoyed it. One of our board members just said we need a part 2. So I don't know about that. It was really hard to schedule this with everybody on this call. But again, I want to say thank you for your candor, and both of you for your ongoing commitment to advancing women. So for our audience, have a safe rest of the semester, and please stay tuned for the Fall 2021 Kentucky ACE Women's Network Leadership Program. So with that, everyone stay safe. Goodbye.
Thank you so much. And I'm so grateful to have a mentor like Eli Capilouto. It's true. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.